I've got an OTB game that I'd like to review for you guys today. So this is a game that I played yesterday afternoon, so it's pretty fresh on my mind. And I was playing against a much higher rated opponent. As you can see, I was playing against Jerry Donahue, who is an NM, and he's rated 2000. I know Jerry, and we've played many games together, but most of them have been casual, rapid games, blitz games, stuff like that. We've only played one tournament game before, in which he beat me, but it was with opposite colors. Anyway, let's go ahead and see how this game went. So he started with e4, and I played on the accelerated dragon, which is my favorite opening with black against e4. And, since we've played a lot of games, we kind of know what each other like to play. So we've had this game many times before. And in my preparation for this game, I was thinking that he would play the move knight b3. That was my recollection, was that he liked to play knight b3 here. And I looked at some GM games from this position, and I had some ideas and some lines of what I wanted to do, which all got thrown out the window when he played bishop e3, which is actually like the main move. And I'm prepared for this move too, but I was still sort of taken by surprise, but not the end of the world. So I continued with knight f6, and now he played knight b3. So I think what must have happened is he's always played this way against me, but I forgot the order that he liked to play. I forgot the move order he liked to play. I thought he played knight b3 a move sooner, but he actually plays it here, I guess. So this was the first moment where I had to kind of like get my bearings in the game, because I'm somewhat out of my opening prep. But I was comparing that position to the position I had prepped for, which was knight b3 here. And I had noticed in the GM games that I looked at that white was usually playing bishop g5, or white was just leaving the bishop here to sort of keep b2 defended, since this bishop could be strong later. So I decided that bishop e3 and then knight b3 is probably relatively benign, because the bishop doesn't usually want to be on e3, at least from the games that I looked at. I looked at maybe 5 games. So I figured this must be fine for me, no big deal. And I just sort of kept continuing with my plan that I had for the knight b3 original lines. So I castled. He played bishop e2, which is consistent with what I had seen in many Grandmaster games. I played d6. And then here's where I was thrown well and truly out of my prep, when he played h4. So I think that my reaction to the move bishop e3 combined with knight b3 was not entirely correct. I think I should have thought to myself, he's going to try to do this, typical queen d2 long castle and pawn storm on the king side attack that you see in the dragon. But for some reason that hadn't occurred to me until the move h4 was on the board. So to this point in the game, I had a pretty healthy lead on the clock. This game was, the time control for this game was 90 plus 30. So I actually had more time than I started with, because I was basically just blitzing out moves. And he had spent maybe 10 minutes or so. So I think I was ahead like 13 minutes on the clock or something like that. And I spent like all 13 minutes in this position to figure out how I wanted to continue. Because I've had many games where, they play h5, they trade, they get the queen d2, they put their bishop here, and then I just get crushed on the h-file. And it feels like if I ever try to stop that with like h5, that they just play f3, g4, and they crack the position open, and they do sort of the same thing. So this is probably a good moment for you guys to take a moment to think about what you would do here. I think there's more than one good move, but try to come up with a plan for black here. Do we need to be worried about this king side attack from white, or can we just go about our business? How should we react? Okay, so after much thought, I decided to play h5, and I anticipated that you know, if he's going to keep attacking on the king side, he's going to play the move f3, which is what he did play. And my plan was to play knight e5. And the idea is that I'm attacking these squares a lot, so it's a little bit harder for him to get away with g4. So if he plays g4, which he didn't play, my plan was just to take it. And I think I can just get away with taking this thing. So I think I've just got enough pieces. And one critical point is, you know, I'd sort of like to take with the bishop to keep an eye on h5. But I thought maybe if I take with the bishop, he just trades and like then he can do this. But he's running out of pieces. More importantly, his bishop is hanging here. So this whole plan like doesn't really work for white. G4 is just a little too soon. He's not ready to play that yet. Okay, so he played knight d4 instead, which I felt very good about because the knight was on d4, then it went to b3, then it went back to d4. So it feels like white has kind of wasted some time here in the opening, and surely that's a good thing for me. Now, the reason he did it is he didn't want me to play bishop e6, which was what I was planning to do. And actually, bishop e6 is the idea that I saw a lot in these knight b3 lines. That's one downside of the move knight b3, is that e6 is no longer, you know, defended. So black can get away with bishop e6. Okay, so he stopped that, but it sort of cost him 2 tempi because he went to b3 and back. So I just played bishop d7, the only other, you know, reasonable square for the bishop. And he played queen d2. He's getting ready to castle long, it seems. I played rook c8, which is very typical in the dragon. A lot of times there's exchange sacrifices here. You know, the rook's just very good on the half-open c-file. I was also very interested in playing knight c4, which would net me the bishop pair in this case. So he just castled, and I was very happy to play knight c4. I also considered queen a5, but I wasn't really sure why queen a5 would be better than knight c4 right away. And I just went with knight c4 because I thought, I'm getting the bishop pair, that's got to be good. You know, why can I say no to that? How could I say no to that? And I also figured if he gives up this bishop for the knight, then there's a little bit less sting in the move g4 later. Like that's one less piece that's helping him out here. But he pretty much has to take with this bishop. Maybe there's some weird line where he can get away with this, but that just looks weird. And ostensibly, this bishop should be more valuable for white than the light-scored bishop. So he did give up the light-scored bishop. I took back, of course. And I like that in this position, he can't play any kind of bishop h6 thing, which he might like to play, since this bishop is often very strong in these dragon structures. But he can't do that because I can take the knight. And after taking with the queen, then I could pick up his bishop. So he can't do anything crazy like that. So he played knight d5. Now, my first reaction to the move knight d5 was sort of fear and anxiety, because what I realized is that his point is he wants to get rid of this knight, and then g4 starts becoming more dangerous. You know, this knight is a pretty good defender over these squares. So I was kind of like, uh-oh, like, is that going to be bad for me? But I actually found a nice sequence of moves here. And this is another good moment for you guys to spend some time to think about what you would do. So if you'd like to pause the video and try to find a plan for black here. Okay, so hopefully you found the best continuation, which actually gives black a really nice advantage, which is to just trade the knight. And after he recaptures, we have a pretty surprising move, I think, queen b6. And it looks like that's crazy because we're lining up for some big discovered attack. So it looks like white has some, some kind of move which is going to cause us a headache. But against any of those moves I highlighted, we could play queen takes g2 mate. Queen takes b2 mate. That's b2, not g2. So the knight is somewhat pinned to this checkmate. So even though we're walking into this, he can't really do anything. The only thing he can do is he could play knight b3, which blocks the queen from getting to b2. Man, I really want to call that g2. Blocks the queen from getting to b2. And I saw that and I thought I'll just play queen a6 and I'm attacking here. I can double rooks pretty quickly. This is still looking pretty good for black's attack. So that didn't happen. Now I want to go back here. So I mentioned that, I had some anxiety over him potentially starting his attack with g4. And I think the way that I overcame that and found this correct line is I sort of just recognized, like, there's nothing I can do about it. Like, these knights are going to get traded. Like, I can't really entertain a move like knight h7. Like, that's just awful. And it doesn't even stop g4. Or knight e8, similar problems. So I might as well just trade the knights. And, then it's my turn. I get to kind of strike first. I get to do something before he starts with his g4 business. So I've noticed this happens a lot to me in tournament games, and I think it probably happens to a lot of players, is you have sort of an emotional reaction to a move or to a situation that arises on the board, and sometimes that emotional reaction gets in the way of you actually finding the correct way out or the correct, move, whatever it may be. Like in this case, there's actually nothing to get out of. Like black's doing well. So, as human beings, we have these, sort of visceral reactions to things, and those served our ancestors well when they were, running around in the woods, foraging and escaping predators, but they don't necessarily serve any purpose when you're playing a game of chess. So sometimes you kind of have to just make a point to forget about whatever your visceral reaction was, whether it was a positive emotion or a negative one, and just say, I'm just going to calculate and I'm just going to find whatever I think the best line is. So that's basically what I had to do here. And I'm proud that I was able to find this sequence, which looks scary, but it just gives black an advantage. So I expected he would play the move knight b3 here, which we looked at earlier. And he again sort of surprised me because he played a move that I had more or less written off because it looks really weakening to me. And he played b3, just attacking my rook. And okay, he's also like unpinning the knight. Now there's not this idea to play queen b2 mate. So I need to pick a square for my rook. And it's not immediately obvious. Because since this queen b2 thing is off the table, now there might be some big knight discovery that we have to watch out for. And that's basically what he told me after the game, is he said that, b3 was sort of an attempt to play for a win. Like he thought the tactics could work out in white's favor here. Whereas if he just plays knight b3, he viewed that as a more passive move and not really playing for a win. So he played b3, which the computer actually says is best. So my understanding of the position was wrong. And I hadn't really considered, like, where am I going to move my rook if he plays b3? Maybe the most natural looking square is c7, but then you're running into all sorts of knight discoveries again. Like the move that scared me was knight e6, attacking the queen and the rook. So there's a much better square for the rook. And I hadn't foreseen this at all when I played queen b6, which is maybe a little bit of incomplete calculation on my part. But I just played rook c5, which again looks like black's going to get in trouble because all this stuff's lined up with his bishop. So what if he like moves his knight away and attacks everything, which he didn't do, by the way. But as a consequence of him having played b3, his dark squares are really weak now, and I can just calmly play queen a6, which was my plan. And you know, I have some threats here. Like queen a3 check would be leading to checkmate. Now the funny thing is, my calculation was wrong here too, because I thought he can't take the rook because I'm threatening mate. But when he takes the rook, he stopped my mate. So I sort of miscalculated there. And the computer says what I did, like this would still be correct. Like queen a6 is still good for black. But after this, it just says take back. And I mean, exchange sacrifices are pretty common in the dragon, especially when this bishop just becomes a total monster after the fact. So the computer just says this is great for black. Queen a3 is a big threat that has to be dealt with. I guess c4 is probably, you know, something that white has to be cognizant of as well. And, you know, it looks like black's attack is just coming faster than white's. We got the two bishops, you know. Okay, so none of that actually happened. And one thing I didn't even mention yet is that I'm attacking this pawn. And to be honest, when I played the move rook c5, I wasn't even thinking about that pawn. I was just thinking about like, hey, let's get in there and try to mate him, you know? Okay, so the pawn's hanging. So he played c4, which makes sense to defend the pawn. But obviously this king is getting pretty airy over here. So his king is really, you know, the king position is pretty weak. Okay, so with everything kind of defended over here, and with the queen now stopping any tricks with queen b2 mate, there is some threat to win material here. So I just moved my queen out of the way, and I'm still thinking about this, you know, these tender dark squares. But I also would really like to get b5 in and start opening up white's king even more for my pieces. Okay, he played king b1, which I expected. The king looks a lot safer over there. You know, now his queen is not completely tied to this defense here. Usually the king's safer on b1 when you castle long. Now there's a very strong move for black here, which I did not find. This was another position where I had a decently long think. You know, there's a lot of ways that look pretty tempting to start trying attacking on the queen side. But there's one way that is by far the most incisive, I think. So pause the video, see if you can find the absolute best move for black. In the game, I played rook b8 with the idea of playing b5. And that's a good move. Black still has a pretty big advantage. But even better is just to play b5 right away. No preparation needed. And the reason is that although this knight ostensibly is on a very good square on d4, the knight is basically just in a defensive role, not only blocking up this diagonal that is pointing towards white's king, but stopping the move bishop f5, which is going to be really irritating for white if I can ever play bishop f5. I hadn't really fully appreciated that idea at this point in the game, so I didn't see the point of b5. But the point of b5, the point of b5 here is that this knight really is not a defender of the b5 square at all. So if he takes with the knight, let's see if I can remember the right move order here. I mean, probably the best thing is just simply bishop f5. And if the king comes here, then we just take the knight. And we're up a piece. And the only way for white to avoid that is to like give his queen away. So he definitely can't do that. If he takes with the pawn first, it's the same situation. This knight really can't leave the d4 square and let f5 be available to our bishop. So we can actually just take with the rook. And again, if he takes, then bishop f5 is going to cause him a world of problems. Again, you know, he blocking with the queen is absurd. The only other legal move is here, and well, we just have rook c8. Okay, so we can really see that White's king is very precarious, and unfortunately, I didn't look deeply enough at this move b5. I saw that it was legal. I considered it, but I really missed this idea of bishop f5 being so strong, which I shouldn't miss because it's like a check, and the king has so few squares to begin with. Okay, so I played rook b8 to prepare b5. And he played rook c1. Reasonable move. You know, he's trying to get counterplay on the c file, or maybe more likely just trade off material on the c file. While he was thinking, I thought maybe he would play a4 in an attempt to stop b5. And for a long time, I was thinking I might just play b5 anyway. Because there could be some tricks. You know, at this point, I think I was kind of noticing the bishop f5 idea. And then eventually I noticed that even better than that is probably just this sacrifice must just be winning for black. Because after this, rook takes. The white king's just completely naked. We're going to collect this pawn. There's just no way. I just can't believe that this sacrifice wouldn't work. And the computer backs me up. White's king is just completely dead here. Okay, but a4 didn't happen. He played rook c1, and I was like, great, that didn't stop b5. So b5, finally. Okay, and he did take it. And I'm sure he anticipated b5. And I think his idea was, you know, with rook c1, is he's hoping to trade pieces here. But by this point in the game, like I said, I had sort of realized, like, hey, this knight really needs to watch out over f5. So there's a lot of ways to recapture here. And two of them are better than the others, which probably is a pretty big hint. So I played what I think is the best move. I think the computer says either rook capture are sort of tied. I took with the c rook. Basically, I just want to keep more material on the board because I felt like I had a nice attack. I don't want to trade pieces and have it fizzle out. And I also thought there could be some ideas of sacrificing later. So no more trade here. And he thought for a long time in this position. And he played a move that I hadn't considered like at all. And I was really kind of floored by it. He played rook c6. I guess we should go back and show that, again, white really can't be taking this rook because he's getting murdered by bishop f5. And here, at least he could block with the rook. My plan was to take the knight, as I recall. Trying to see if there's something better. My plan was to take the knight. And I'm not even really down in exchange because I can just get the exchange back whenever I want. But I'm also threatening queen a3, queen b2 mate. So it looks tough. He played rook c6, which threw me for a loop a bit. On the one hand, this is a really nice move to see if you're playing black, because you're like white is sort of admitting that they're in a lot of trouble here, which I don't need white to admit that, but like it helps. You know, it helps to see your opponent is agreeing, like, yeah, your attack is pretty strong here, because he's just offering material to try to slow down the attack. So I think I could just take the rook and have a totally great position, and he can't even take my rook after that because I would just take with the bishop and then I'd be up a piece. But I liked my attacking prospects and I didn't want to trade off any more pieces. And frankly, my bishop is just a stronger piece than his rook. Like, these bishop f5 ideas are just so potent that, you know, I want to have those in my back pocket. I don't want that to be off the table. So I just moved my queen. My queen's attacked. So I put my queen on the most aggressive square, queen a3, which is the best move according to the computer. He brought his other rook over to, again, you know, well, he's activating his pieces, hoping for some counterplay on the c file, I guess. But now black is completely winning, even more than before. And this is a really good calculation exercise. So please pause the video and try to find the best, absolute best continuation for black. Okay, so there's a lot to consider here. And pat yourselves on the back if you found the best move, which I also found, hooray, rook takes b3. Now, I said at the beginning, or if I didn't say at the beginning, I meant to say at the beginning, that I'm very happy with how this game went, because I think for the most part, I outplayed my opponent, but I had some deficiencies in my calculation. And this is actually where those sort of started. At least these are where the like major ones sort of show up. So rook takes b3 is the best move. That was my instinctive move, and my calculation was okay, but not perfect. And if my calculation's perfect here, then the game's just over. I don't have to do any more. So after rook takes b3, he took back with the pawn, and hopefully when you paused the video, you know, a minute ago, you saw this position and you found the correct continuation, which I did not find. So this position is actually mate in 4. And I just played rook takes pawn, which black is winning, but it's not mate in 4. So the correct move, which leads to mate, is bishop f5. Again, this knight is really overworked in this case, because it's having to stop bishop f5, which is obviously a crushing move, and it's having to defend this pawn on g3. So if he takes the bishop, then we take back with the queen. In my analysis, for some reason, I only looked at taking with the rook. But taking with the queen is the correct move because that stops king c2. And now it's just checkmate. The only legal move is to block with the queen, and then that's checkmate, obviously. And if he's not taking with the knight, then let's see, there's a really aesthetic end to the game. I'm going to see if I can remember it. So if he blocks with the knight, then this is checkmate. This bishop is, again, pretty good. If he blocks with the rook, then we have rook takes b3. And again, the knight is just pinned and overworked and terrible. So the only legal move is knight takes rook, and then this is the aesthetic finish, queen b2 checkmate, exploiting the pin on the rook here. So I think this is like the coolest way that the game could have ended. And it's very disappointing that I didn't find bishop f5. Because the reason is, well, A, it's just like forced mate, and it's not like that hard if you have a lot of time to calculate. But my move, rook b3, relies on the fact that he can't do this. And the reason he can't do it is because of the same checkmate. I take, and then this is mate. So, like, I saw the idea that the knight can't really move. So I'm not sure why I didn't connect the dots. Like, hey, this knight has too much to defend. And it didn't dawn on me that, like, he really can't do this. He's just going to get mated. So it's frustrating. I think I let up a little bit because I knew I was winning at this point. And also we were getting, you know, fairly deep into the game, maybe 2.5 or 3 hours at this point. Probably closer to 2.5. So I think I just sort of had a bit of a lapse in focus and in calculation. Okay, so he took with the pawn. I took with the rook, which is still a winning move. And the point is, even though we just sacrificed a rook, we got 2 pawns, and as I've pointed out in detail, he can't move the knight, so he has to play king c2, and now I can take this bishop. And that bishop was for the taking after second rook the second rook capture on b3. So he has to play king c2. I take the bishop. He has very little time on the clock at this point. He's probably down to about 5 to 10 minutes. And I have probably around 25 minutes. But remember, we have a 30-second increment. Okay. He played rook c3, which is seeking to try to trade some pieces and relieve the pressure. I played bishop a4 check. For some reason that I don't fully understand and haven't really dived into, the computer says queen a4 check is the best. I guess it's just because we're going to collect this knight in some line. That makes sense. I played bishop a4, getting, the final piece into the attack and preventing him from ever trying to run to d1. He played king b1, which is the only sensible legal move. And I played queen b4 check, which is the only winning move, but by far the most obvious move. He played king a2. And it looks like black should just be able to win the knight here with some sequence of moves. Like maybe we trade the rook first or something. But as I was calculating here, I got frustrated because I couldn't actually find a way to win the knight cleanly. I realized that white has a very tricky resource at the end of the line, and I couldn't find a move order that that saved everything. So, for example, the first move that I thought of was queen takes knight. And, well, that just doesn't work because of queen takes rook, which I eventually realized. Although, wait a minute, we actually... Yeah, I mean, this doesn't really work. This is probably a draw with the bishop and 2 pawns for the rook in the endgame. So I also thought about bishop takes knight. So this doesn't work because of check and my queen's hanging. I almost forgot about... I almost missed that in the game, too. It took me a while to realize that he had that sneaky threat. Okay, so when I realized those moves don't work, I played rook takes rook first and went from there. So after rook takes rook, he took back with the queen. And again, it looks like we should just be able to win this knight now. But unfortunately, we can't so cleanly. So if we take, he trades, and then he lands this fork at the end of the day. And again, this should just be a draw. We'll end up with a bishop and 2 pawns versus a rook in an endgame. I feel like I would rather have black, but, it felt like I should get more out of the position than this. Okay. Now, it turns out that in this position, the best move, according to the computer, and I'm going to struggle to remember the reason why, the best move is bishop b3 check, which I saw was legal. And I remember now there's a crazy line that the computer gives. So knight takes b3 would be sort of the obvious move. And then it suggests bishop takes rook. And after queen takes rook, then we have this check here. This is what I missed for sure. And we're just leading to mate. Yeah, so that's a little difficult to see, I think. I saw that bishop b3 check was legal, but I didn't quite, put together all the dots there. Yeah, and again, I guess he can't take with the rook because it's pinned to the queen. So really I should find this too, because these are sort of only moves. I guess I probably, if I looked at this position, I probably only looked at this check. I don't know if I actually looked at just taking the rook. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty forcing. I mean, we're obviously, if he doesn't take the rook, he's obviously completely lost. Okay, so more stuff that I missed, more bad calculation. I just traded rooks, and yeah, I was very frustrated here that I hadn't just sort of knocked him out tactically. It felt like I should have had some knockout, and I did because there was that mate in 4, but I didn't find it. So now black's still winning here, and I played the best move. I played queen b6, with the idea that I really want to take the knight with the bishop. And then there's no trade, and this fork doesn't work. And I want to avoid the queen trade, like, for sure, because his king is completely ridiculous and my king is completely safe. He played queen c4, which I hadn't really expected, nor did I understand the point of, but it's basically setting up this fork. And for a moment, I thought the game was sort of basically over, because again, I calculated poorly here. And I thought, I'll take the knight, he'll take the bishop, or if he takes the bishop, then this is checkmate. And that was the extent of my analysis. I didn't look at other moves, which was pretty bad calculation. So I took the knight, and of course he did not take the bishop. He did not hang mate in 1. He played rook b1. And now he's like almost holding on here, because he is going to pick up one of these bishops. The computer gives the move queen a5. I may have to invoke the computer to help me. So I'm wondering, is the point that if he takes, if nothing else, I have check, and I'll just be up 2 pawns and a queen ending. Is that the idea? Yes, it is. And it gives -5. That makes sense. Queen endings can be tricky even when you're up a lot of pawns, but my king's pretty safe, and this pawn should be good. This pawn's weak, this pawn's weak, this pawn's weak. Should all be good for black there. Okay. Unfortunately, instead of that, I played queen c5, and now the game actually should be a draw if white plays the correct move here. So we can kind of flip it and think from my opponent's point of view. What is white's only move that draws here? So my opponent played the very tempting move, which is queen takes bishop. And that move actually loses, which I didn't realize at the time, but I sort of just played natural moves from here and the game won itself. The drawing move for white is to play rook b4. And the point of rook b4 is, obviously he's still going to pick up one of these bishops, but he's maintaining this pawn on d5, which is really important. So in the game, he took the bishop, I took the pawn. And now I'm down on exchange, but I have 3 pawns for it. So, I mean, I'm probably just winning no matter what happens. But if we ever have like a queen trade or something, I should probably win those endgames too. Now, I don't necessarily want to trade queens because his king is still ridiculous. But that's something that, you know, he has to be aware of. I've just got a lot of material here. Okay. He played queen b3. And like I said, I sort of just played the most natural moves from here, and the game ended up winning itself. So I played queen a5 check. This is the forcing sequence. His only, well, he could play queen a4 and hang mate, but the only sensible move is queen a3. And then again, check. Again, the only sensible move is king b3. And this is, you know, maybe a good example of why winning this pawn was so big. You know, if there's ever a big trade, like, for example, if he tried to trade pieces like this, which obviously wouldn't make any sense, but just to illustrate, if we ever get some in-game, like, I'm just up a lot of pawns. Okay. So he played king b3, and I just grabbed this pawn. I couldn't really find anything better. I do wonder if I could just trade queens and win that way. I haven't actually looked at that. I guess this move also trades queens, because then he has to play king a2 to defend his rook. That's the computer's preference, is queen d3. And then it's that is, I should have done that, because here he has to give up material. I never saw that. I didn't see that in the game, and I didn't see it when I analyzed the game already. So that would have been the classy way to do it. And then I would play queen takes here. Yeah, and this just ends the game by force. Now he can't keep playing. Okay, so that would have been really classy. My question is, can I just go here and like just trade and win? Okay, it says this is getting a little dicey. It's giving -2. There's no reason for black to do this. Black could hope for more. Man, I really wish I had found this queen d3, queen here maneuver. Yeah, because he has to go here to defend the rook. This is just completely forced. Ah, that would have been so classy. Okay. Well, I'm a greedy pawn grubber, so I just oh yeah, I took the pawn. And now my thought is, I'll take this pawn, I'll trade queens. That endgame I know is winning. I have no doubts about that endgame. Now he's at like a minute on the clock here, so he basically played instantly, and his move loses instantly. So he played king c4, which allows the pretty simple tactic queen c2 check. And my only reservation when I was calculating this was if I trade the rook for the bishop, you know, maybe he can get some kind of queen ending where he's got perpetual threats, you know, threats of a perpetual check, or he picks off a pawn and now it gets difficult to win. I'm up a lot of pawns here though. But none of that is ever true. So after queen c2, he just resigned, which is very sensible. If we actually play this line out, the only move here that would frighten me even the slightest is if he could get away with taking this pawn. But obviously he can't, because this skewer is good for black. So since he can't even take that pawn, there's not even a move for me to be afraid of. You know, this you know, it will take some time to win, but it should be a pretty easy win. So he didn't you know, force me to prove it. He just resigned here. So okay, overall it was a good game. Like I said, I think for the most part I outplayed my opponent. I got a really nice attack on his king. I sacrificed my rook, you know, but just couldn't quite find the finishing touch there with the bishop f5 move leading to mate, which would have saved me a lot of headache in this phase of the game. So I feel good about the game, but at the same time I feel bad about the game because I played well, but you know, in some universe, in this position, he plays rook b4 and I don't win the game because I couldn't find mate in 4 earlier. So unfortunately with chess, you don't just get to ignore all the bad things that you did and only focus on the good things you did. Well, if you want to improve, you don't get to do that. So I want to feel great about the game, but instead I can only feel good about the game because of this missed knockout punch here with bishop f5 check. Yeah, let's show that mate again. That was really pretty. Here, yeah, let's just pretend that that this is how the game ended. Look at that. Oh, just look at how beautiful that is. So we'll make that the thumbnail of the. No, I probably won't do that. But that's what the thumbnail could have been if I were a better chess player. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, everybody.